Okay. All right, everyone, welcome. I hope that we have some more people who will join, and we will try to catch them up as we go and send people recordings if they've missed things and so forth. It's been a while since we've been able to meet in person. I'm hoping that as more and more people get vaccinated, we will be able to get back to face-to-face programming, and that will, I don't know, it will just feel more immediate to everyone, I think. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Rebecca Rolfus. I'm the president of the League of Women Voters for 2 more months. I will be rotating off to past president in May, and which is when we will have our annual meeting. So anyone, of course, is invited to the annual meeting when we will vote on the budget, programming, bylaws changes, and most importantly, our new board, who will set the direction for the organization in the coming year and 2 years. We have kind of a bi-year this year with no big elections going on, but 2022, there will be significant elections around the country and especially in Georgia. So I'm looking forward to seeing, I've heard a little bit, but looking forward to and hearing what they have planned for that. I'm also I'm gonna let Kim introduce our speaker tonight, but I'm very excited about this because Velma Fan reached out to me over a year ago, and the plan was that we would have this program last March being Women's History Month, and her subject tonight being one of those women who did amazing work, but has been more or less lost to history. And so we're thrilled to have her back, even if it does have to be via Zoom. It's taken us a year, but we're going to make it happen tonight. So welcome to everyone. And with that, I'll let Kim introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Rebecca. It's my honor to introduce Velma Thomas, a public historian and author of several nonfiction books, including the award-winning interactive Lest We Forget, The Passage from Africa to Slavery and Emancipation, Freedom's Children, We Shall Not Be Moved, and a book and CD entitled No Man Can Hinder Me. Velma served as manager of the Shrine of the Black Madonna Cultural Center and Bookstore in Atlanta from 1987 to 2000, where she created the nationally acclaimed Black Holocaust exhibit, a collection of original documents on slavery and resistance in America. In early 2012, Velma was selected as a subject expert for the PBS documentary Underground Railroad, The William Still Story, which continues to air nationally. Her work, The Odd Fellow City, The Promise of a Leading Black Town, was published in the 2010 edition of the Journal of Georgia Association of Historians. Velma's research, Your Advertisement Troubles Me, Atlanta's Gold Dust Twins, has been published online, and an interview with her aired on WABE in 2015. Her latest research work, which is the subject of her presentation this evening, is Getting Everything of Value Out of It for the Race, which explores the contributions of Mamie George Williams, a Black Savannah who rose to be the highest-ranking Republican leader in Georgia. Velma holds a bachelor's degree in journalism from Howard University, a master's degree in political science from Emory University, and a graduate-level certificate in heritage preservation from Georgia State University. She serves as Special Projects Director for Atlanta City Council member Michael Julian Bond, where she works with a team to create the city's Heritage Trail and to commemorate the accomplishments of the Atlanta student movement. Velma has served as keynote speaker at universities, libraries, museums, and conferences across the nation, as a distinguished scholar at the historic Penn Center on St. Helena Island, South Carolina, and as adjunct professor in the Department of African American Studies at Georgia State University. Currently, Velma is a historian with New South Associates, Inc. in Stone Mountain, Georgia, which provides cultural resource management services, including archaeology and historic preservation, cemetery studies, and public interpretation. Velma is the recipient of several awards, among them a 2004 Georgia Historical Records Advisory Board Award for Excellence in Research Using the Holdings of an Archive, and the American Library Association Award for Lest We Forget, The Passage from Africa to Slavery and Emancipation. Please join me in welcoming Velma.
Thank you. And thank you for everyone who is here. This is very exciting. As I said earlier, this has been a long time coming, but everything happens at the right time. So I'm glad to be here, and I can come back next year when the pandemic is over and see everybody in person. I want to share with you Mamie Williams, getting everything of value out of it for the race. I learned about her while I was researching a different person. And if anybody's a researcher, you know sometimes that happens. You're on one trail and you catch something, and you go this way and you're everywhere. And so I had to keep reeling myself back in. I was looking at Benjamin Davis, who also was a Black Republican and the leader of the Grand United Order of Odd Fellows for the state of Georgia. He was also an editor. So he had a newspaper, and I was just kind of going through, finding out more about him. And this woman kept coming up, this Mamie George Williams. And I'm saying, who is this lady? Sometimes she and Benjamin Davis were on the same footing. A lot of times they were at each other. And I kept telling her, I said, okay, I'll come back to you. I will come back to you, but I have to finish this project. And the more I began to see her and read about her, and I noticed, I said, wow, this woman is phenomenal. And she has newspaper articles. People are writing about her across the nation. So I just want to introduce her to you. And all the while I was doing this, I kept saying, why don't we know anything about her? Mamie George Williams was a towering figure, a noted civic and political leader of the early 20th century. A native and lifelong resident of Savannah, she held leadership positions in local and national women's clubs, served as a member of the Interracial Commission of Georgia, rose to become Georgia's ranking member of the Republican Party, and established a school and home for African American girls. To many, Williams was the Esther of her people, a woman who stood before the ruling powers of her day. Williams called out political traitors, advanced causes, scored victories, and bore defeat. Today, few people speak her name. However, for a time, Mamie Williams stood tall among African American leaders, determined to extract from what she called the smudge of politics everything of value for her race. Now, one can say that Williams was born of privilege as much as an African American could be of privilege just a few years after the Civil War. Born in 1872 to James and Sarah Miller, and they were religious leaders in Savannah, she was given the name Mary Frances. However, she was always called Mamie. She completed her early education at Beach Institute. Any Beach Institute people with me here?
Yeah.
All right. A missionary school in Savannah sponsored by the Congregational Church. Anybody here from First Congregational Church? She has ties everywhere. We're going to talk about her. She has her fingers in everything in Savannah. She was a graduate of Atlanta University. She was educated and refined. In 1899, she married Florence Rambert, who died in 1900. Soon afterwards, she married George S. Williams, a noted educator and businessman in Savannah. In 1915, she was widowed again. Throughout the early years of her career, she was known as Mrs. George S. Williams, later recognized in her own right as Mrs. Mamie Williams, and to her closest friends, she was Mamie George. Williams believed in civic engagement, perhaps as a value instilled in her by her parents or her years at the university. During World War I, Williams demonstrated her patriotism, engaging in war camp community service and supporting Liberty Loan drives, which provided crucial emotional support for Black troops. Her 2,400 hours of volunteer work, I have to say that again, 2,400 hours of volunteer work with the Toussaint L'Ouverture branch of the American Red Cross earned her a coveted pin. And I sent that photo. Were you able to post that?
We did not, we had it in one of our announcements of the
Okay, great. So you see her there, and she's there with other Black women, and they're sitting proud, and they are supporting the Black troops over in the war. She was a fair-complected woman with auburn hair. Williams appeared white to many, and one time she drew raised eyebrows at a meeting of African American women. So you know how women can be. You walk in, you say, you know, we don't say it out loud, we say it between our teeth. So, she was a woman of independent means. She owned a home in Savannah, and she was known to travel to Long Island, New York to visit families and just to have a break. And I'm thinking in the 1920s or earlier, a Black woman on the road from Georgia to New York. We know about the Green Book, the places that you were safe to stop at if you were African American. But still, who wants to take that ride? I don't care how fair-skinned complected you were still a Black woman traveling through the South. Social service and politics were her life's calling. She would make a profound impact in both arenas. So the year was 1920, and it was historic. And by August 36, states had ratified the 19th Amendment, granting women the right to vote. Can I get an applause? William rolled up her sleeves and with unmatched zeal set out to register women in Georgia, particularly African American women. According to the Pittsburgh Courier newspaper, Miss Williams registered so many colored women in Georgia that the governor of the state stopped registration for all women until he could pass some certain legislation. And when I began to read this, I said, okay, she registered women to vote in 1920, but in Georgia, women couldn't vote until when? 1922. Where was this gap? So this is a lesson in Georgia politics. According to the Georgia law, you had to be registered to vote 6 months before you voted. If the bill passed in August and the presidential election was in November, you didn't have 6 months. And there was a law that Georgia could have passed that would waive this, but Georgia said, nope, we're not letting women vote. Sit down, sit back, we'll let you know when it's your turn. She joined the Women's Suffrage Club of Chatham County, serving as a member of its executive committee. The club held forums at local churches, invited political leaders to speak to women on the process of voting. It took a census of every woman of voting age and held mock elections. Concerned with the general well-being of African Americans, the club promoted literacy by establishing night schools for adults. From 1920 to 1924, Williams held the post of vice president of the National Association of Colored Women's Clubs, setting politics and policies and agendas. Her contemporaries, Mary Church Terrell, we've heard of her, activist and first president of the association. Ida B. Wells, fiery journalist and anti-lynching crusader. Maggie Lena Walker, first woman of any race to charter a bank in the United States. And Mary McLeod Bethune, founder of Dayton Normal and Industrial Institute, later renamed Bethune College. We know about this woman. She is united. She is working with the big names, the Black women who are saying, we are club women and we're going to lift, as they said, as we climb. Active in voter registration and education, Williams rose through Georgia's Republican ranks. Just as the backdrop, we all know that African Americans voted Republican. We were voting the party of Lincoln that freed us. So she was Republican through and through. She supported the party and is said to have brought out, hold on y'all, because I had to check this figure 3 or 4 times, I'm still checking it, 40,000 Georgia women to vote in the 1920 presidential election.
40,000.
40,000 from her office in Atlanta. So apparently she had her tentacles everywhere, campaigning in all the counties. From there, Williams flooded the state with literature, making speeches and picketing polling places. Now, of course, you know, sometimes the press will exaggerate. I think the point they're making is that she made a tremendous impact. Here's this woman who was doing all of this work. And again, I have to ask, why don't we know anything about her? In 1924, she was designated chairman of the Republican State Central Advisory Committee of Colored Women to register African American women and encourage them to vote for the renomination and re-election of Calvin Coolidge. Williams was mentored by Henry Link Johnson, a revered National Republican committeeman from Georgia. Johnson's brilliant arguments against the lily white Republicans who vowed to unseat Black Republican leaders were legendary. She met at times bitter differently with my friend Benjamin Davis, Georgia's national committeeman, editor, and shrewd political leader. So she has someone here who's beginning to say, Republican Party in the South, Black people vote the Republican Party. But there was a group that was coming together. They were termed the Lily Whites, and they were going to turn this Republican Party around on all the Black leaders so that the party would be more amenable and more welcoming, and so that white people would say, okay, here's an alternative. So we have to watch to see what became of the Republican Party and the Black people who supported it. Williams was awarded for her dedication and hard work. In 1924, the Republican Party adopted the 50-50 rule to increase the number of women holding state committee chairs. Committeeman Johnson seized the opportunity to place a Black woman in power of this position. He appointed Mamie Williams committee woman for Georgia. With that appointment, she became the first Republican committee woman for the state and the first African-American woman in the country to serve on the Republican National Committee. Why don't we know anything about that? When Williams was appointed, the Black press applauded. Headlines of the Pittsburgh Courier read, Georgia woman associate member of the National Committee, Miss George W. Williams, first to sit on the National Committee of her party. The Chicago Defender recorded, club leader selected to GOP ranks, Miss George S. Williams wins high honor. So we see the 50-50 rule was a boost for all women, but race prejudice kept white women from celebrating. While African Americans basked in Williams' appointment, white women stood with pursed lips, hoping to mask their disdain. Reported the Baltimore Afro-American, the new colored Republican committee woman is half the dilemma, so to say. If she had not been selected, a white woman would have been appointed, provided that she had been willing to accept the place and the choice of the national committeeman, Henry Link Johnson, also a Negro. The Republican white women of Georgia, while escaping what they regard as the odium of taking office from the hands of a Negro man, have now to choose the alternative of taking orders from a Negro woman. Now, ain't this a pretty kettle of fish to set out before any group of white women? So we see that she's dealing with racism and she will be dealing with sexism. And basically it's saying that what are white women going to do? They're not used to taking orders from Black women. Black women are supposed to take orders from white women. Supposed to clean their house, raise their kids and say, yes, ma'am. But times were changing. Williams scored another first. At the 1924 convention, she became the first woman in US political history accorded the floor at a Republican National Convention. And as my sister who's on here somewhere says, we're still scrapping for that. She took this historic occasion to speak in defense of the Georgia delegation whose seats were being contested by the Lily White faction. I was so proud of her. She could have used this time to credit herself, to speak upon herself as to how great she is, but she took this time to speak for the race and ask that they continue to support the Black Republicans who have supported them throughout the years. Immediately after the convention, Williams made history again. Hold on, y'all. She was a key organizer of the National Republican League of Colored Women, the first and only national political organization among African American women in the United States. 1924. First Georgia committee woman, first African American woman on the National Committee, first woman of any race to speak at the floor, and the woman who organized the first national political organization for African American women in the United States. Why don't we know about Savannah's Mamie George Williams? In 1925, upon the death of her mentor, Williams became the highest ranking African American Republican in Georgia. So when Link died, that just left her. You have a committee man and you have a committee woman. Now she's the chief boss. She singularly held the reign of power until 1926, when our friend Benjamin Davis was appointed to replace Johnson. And again in 1928, when a contested battle left the post of the committee temporarily vacant. She rose to power during the administration of President Herbert Hoover, a time when Black Republicans were fighting for their political lives. That administration would be remembered as the one that stripped Black Republicans of power, ridding the party of what he called corrupt Black and tan leaders, so that the party would appeal to white voters. Black and tan leaders, these were African Americans with berries in the sundry hues, and a few white people who said, let's be fair. So you'll hear the term Black and tan, and you will hear the term Lily White. Republicans geared up for the 1928 election. In her role as national chairman of citizenship for the National Association of Colored Women's Clubs, Williams asked Club Williams to increase the number of Black registered voters throughout the country. She appealed to African American women in the country to make April registration month. She recommended that a speakers bureau be established in the communities and for open forums on voting. She asked women to urge universities and colleges and high schools to add courses in citizenship and to hold summer sessions at the Convention of Club Women. The women, she said, should be prepared to exercise their vote. Republican presidential candidate Hoover understood the power of Black Republicans to deliver votes in the South. In 1928, during a brief stop in Atlanta, Hoover sought out Williams, inviting the National Committee woman as a guest in his private car. He said, "Where is this lady, Miss Williams? Come join me. Come talk to me." He was trying to woo her because he knew that she could bring the vote. So here you have an African-American woman in 1928 meeting privately who would soon be the president of the United States. One white newspaper said he just reached out and shook her hand. Another one said he shook her hand, took her hand, and sat her in his car. African Americans were a bit distrustful of Hoover, but they supported him and instead decided, well, we're going to be Republicans, so let's work with him. So in 1928, the Black Republicans were awarded with invitation to the inaugural festivities. So when Hoover won, Hoover looked around and said, "How did I get here?" Black Republicans. And I found this so interesting that I just wanted to share this description of the inaugural festivities. This made the first time, she loves first, in the histories that a contingency of African Americans was giving first-class treatment at the White House. Leading Black Republicans poured into the inaugural galas, Williams among them. Reported the Black press, "It is difficult to say when Washington has been as gay or has made such elaborate preparations for an inauguration as for the inauguration of Herbert Hoover. A galaxy of dances, parties, teas, suppers, musicals, banquets, receptions, and whatnot makes it impossible to describe sanely the social activity in Washington during the past weekend. One sees Dr. Albert Johnson and Phyllis arriving in the early Friday morning, toodaloo, Miss Fern Hopkins stepping down from the Red Arrow automobile from the west, wearing a coat trimmed with a luxurious link collar. Miss Grace Kellogg and her charming daughter Muriel dashing madly from one engagement to another. Miss Sarah Arnold in the blue taffeta gown, and Miss George S. Williams arriving at the White House reception with the official family. Politicians in close conversation regarding the Black cabinet. More visitors arriving. Inaugural events continued. Williams, along with Mary Bowles, a committee woman, Black committee woman from Mississippi, and her husband, attended the reception at the White House immediately after the inaugural parade. They were received in the Blue Room with others and enjoyed dinner at the state dining room with the president and his wife. Why haven't we heard about this? The committee women were seated at the official stand at the Capitol for the inaugural ceremony and sat in the president's viewing stand to enjoy the parade. Noted the Philadelphia Tribune because the Black press followed her wherever she went. This is the first time that members of the race have been recipients of social favors at the White House since the Roosevelt administration during the time of Booker T. Washington, when he was a frequent visitor and received such courtesies. I never heard about this. I never heard about this Black group invited. I never heard about this Black woman who arrived with the president, the official family, who sat and ate dinner with them at the Blue Room, wherever that might be, at the White House. Why haven't we heard about Mamie? Social gaiety soon ended. Once in office, Hoover executed his plan to unseat Black leaders and their white supporters. Hoover was disturbed by reports that Black and tan leaders were selling federal appointments. The Pittsburgh Courier reminded the Republican Party that federal appointments are sold by both parties to the highest bidder. If Negro politicians have received any funds to carry on their work from such bidders, they have but followed the policy of politicians since time immemorial, a policy that will be just as eagerly followed by their white successors, if any. So once you're a committee person, you have the authority to appoint people to federal positions. Now they weren't big positions and they had to go to white people because Black people were not able to hold them. So one was like the post office, the general, postmaster general. And so if you were a friend, like politicians do, you reward your friends for their support. And they say, well, let me help out the campaign, dig in and give you a little bit. This was nothing new. But when Black people started to do it, it became a problem. As senior committee person from Georgia, Williams sought the patronage, that's what they call it, the patronage privilege due her. However, Hoover viewed all Black Republican leaders as unsavory and set out to replace them. Williams, who had never been accused of mishandling patronage, wrote letter after letter to President Hoover. This is the man who said, I can't make it without you, come with me. Her appeals were ignored or rebuffed. On March 26, 1929, President Hoover made clear his lack of confidence in the Black Party. In September 1929, Williams, along with several members of the Republican National Committee, visited Hoover at the White House. Now, I'm gonna let that sit for a minute. Visited the president at the White House. The Black press speculated that the visit centered on her request to handle this federal patronage in Georgia. Remaining faithful to the party, Williams chose not to reveal what was said during her conference with the president. I was so disappointed. So I'm going through newspaper after newspaper because I knew this woman did not bite her tongue. And I said, ooh, what did she say to him? I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall, a lamp in the corner, a curtain at the window, anything just to hear what she said. But being a woman who was refined, she held her tongue, at least to the press. So the press gave its answer as to why President Hoover denied Williams her privilege. It wrote, her record is clean. No taint of corruption is charged against her. The only reason that can be assigned for no consideration being shown her is that she is colored. Williams, as did other members of the Black and Tans, witnessed Hoover's determination to lily white the Republican Party. Fearless, Williams spoke her piece. At a banquet for guests, 100 guests of the Stop Lynching League, Williams scolded the president and warned of the downfall of the party if it continued to fail to protect and nourish its Black wing. She warned white leadership was not only impossible, but suicidal and treacherous as it goes against Republican principles. Nonetheless, she reaffirmed her dedication to politics. This woman was steadfast, as the song says, steadfast and immovable. And also to the enfranchisement of Black women and to the tenets of the Republican Party. To many, politics is a sordid game, Williams told the audience at a church in New York. But to me, it means getting everything of value out of it for the race. The Negro woman has a distinct mission in politics, she said. With the granting of the franchise to women, several million colored women were added to the vote, and she entered the political world with the knowledge gleaned from 60 years' experience in all forms of labor. Occupying, as she does, the least favorable position in the economic scale, the colored woman is the first to feel the blow of unemployment, the first to feel the increased cost of food. Because of these things, she should be interested in politics. Williams added, I do not champion the cause of the Republican Party because it's perfect, for it is not, but because it has done so much more for us than any other party. Every law that has been passed to humiliate us has been enacted by the Democratic Party. But Williams was not shy. She did not shy away from the faults of both parties regarding the increased lynchings in the South. Not one voice of protest, she asserted, has come from the heads of our government. The entire nation seems to have gone to sleep in regards to this heinous crime of lynching. The sordid game of politics continued. The Black and Tans fighting an uphill battle. The Credentials Committee recognized Ben Davis, who had teamed with the Lily White faction, trying to save his own hide. James Arnold, who was white, a former Democrat and a man said to have been a high official in the Ku Klux Klan, was recognized as committeeman. Williams arose when Arnold's name was presented and in dramatic and courageous fashion protested the election as a repudiation of the colored membership of the party in the state and warned the move would represent the domination of the Lily White organization leader over the Republicans in the South. She stood up. She said, okay, now you are pushing it a bit much. This man was a member of the Klan. Why are you voting him in as part of the Republican Party? Reported the Baltimore Afro-American, she stood there in the highest body of the Republican Party like a lone reed in the wilderness with a vibrant note of sincerity ringing from her voice as she pleaded for recognition of the masses of the party in the South. But not another voice was raised to support her protest. Anybody ever been in that situation? People vow they're going to back you up. And you look around, they have backed up, backed out, and backed down, left you standing. But she stood, if she had to, as a lone reed to protest the injustice being heaped upon Black Republicans in the state. Oh, she wasn't finished. 1932, Williams took her fight to Chicago. Seems like Chicago has the weirdest kind of conventions. The Democratic convention in Chicago was a mess. This one is a mess, arguing that her faction was the only duly elected delegates, a true representation of the people. Black and whites were in her delegation. But no one gave her the respect of a national committee woman. In her zeal, she spoke over her time. The roar of laughter from the committee room and spectators made it difficult for the chairman's gavel to be heard. William appealed to the committee to make their decision 100% American by, as she said, putting a little color into it and seating her delegation. Her appeal fell on deaf ears. The Lily White Republican faction won. Its delegates were recognized as the representatives of the Republicans in Georgia. Despite failing to gain nomination for the committee woman, Williams held her head high. Perhaps in an attempt to appease this longtime Republican leader, the party placed her name on the planning committee of Hoover's re-election campaign. Isn't that some nerve? Going to kick you out. They're going to put your name on the committee to re-elect him. Williams soundly objected, declaring that she had no intentions of supporting Hoover and Curtis, and that her name had been used without her permission. She called herself Exhibit A of colored citizens who had been victims of the Republican Party. The stench of Lily Whiteism rises to high heavens, Williams said, and unless President Hoover is loud and bold against the principles of such, no thoughtful or honest colored man or woman can support him. Williams curbed her activity in the Republican Party when she lost her seat, but not her efforts to improve life for her race. In 1937, she served as vice president of the Georgia Savings and Realty Corporation in Savannah, and I believe that is the Carver State Bank. Anybody there representing the Carver State Bank? She was a leader in the movement that established the Colored Recreation Center and swimming pool in Savannah. She established the Georgia State Training School for colored girls and served as matron in charge of the Chatham Protective Home for Girls in Thunderbolt. I think now it may have a new name. For several years, she held the post of daughter ruler of Elks of Georgia. Any Elks? She's everywhere. As a director of the Savannah Savings Bank, as a trustee of the Central State College in Macon. She also served as president of the Chatham County Colored Citizens Council. I think they call that the 5 Cs. As a member of the board of directors of the Greenbrier Children's Home. Anybody here from Greenbrier? They're up and still active. As a board member of the Negro Division of the Girl Scouts Association in Savannah. Any Girl Scouts? I talked to the Girl Scouts, never heard of her. Can't find the records, and I'm sure they were looking. But here this jewel is in Savannah. Hello, Savannah. I'm going to adopt her for Atlanta if y'all don't do something about this. Here this jewel is. Her fingers are everywhere. Her loyalty is everywhere. And we have to ask, why haven't we heard of her before? In recognition of her more than 30 years of civic service, Williams was elected an honorary member of the Iota Phi Lambda sorority. Williams is said to have remarked on many occasions that the Negro woman must never live so that she can be humiliated in front of her enemies. Now that's a call we need to put out. You got to live a life where you're respected. In 1932, at the end of her political career, the Atlanta Daily World newspaper thanked Williams for her impeccable service, stating, as a modern Esther pleading for her people, she knew no compromise, accepted no quarter. Miss Williams will go down in history as the champion saint of her people, with her hands unstained and her conscience clear, and with the consolation that at no time did temptation in its glaring disguise move her to deliver her people and her party for 30 pieces of silver. Mamie Williams remained a Republican, but she never forgave the Republican Party for condoning the Lily White policies in the state. She held a grudge. I'm not mad at her. In the 1940s, she gave an interview and she outlined her grudge in the following terms. She said in 1924, I was elected in my own right as committee woman from Georgia, was reelected in 1928, and served until 1932. I was the first Republican committee woman from the state of Georgia and the first Negro committee woman in the country. Now, I am a Republican from principle. I have always voted the Republican ticket. In 1932, Walter Brown and Herbert Hoover lily-whited the party in Georgia. But they were so busy lily-whiting the party that they didn't know that they were permanently kicking themselves out of this country. She said, I have stomped this entire state for the Republican Party. But I wouldn't do it now. I have urged young Negro women to vote, to register, and pay their poll taxes regularly, but I sure wouldn't do it now. It makes me boil, she says, when I recall that Ben Davis, a Negro, first sold us out for a mess of pottage. He sold his birthright. But she added, but I didn't go quietly. I tell you that now. Miss Williams died in Savannah in 1951. And so in my many travels to Savannah, I said, where is she buried? At least I can put a flower there. She's in Laurel Grove, the old section, no headstone, no plot number, no idea, no way of finding her. And I'm thinking, this is a prominent woman. There should be some headstone. There should be some kind of marker. If not, she purchased a burial plot. What was the number? I just talked to them today. I just said, let me make sure my notes are still up to date. You can't find it. It's what happens and what has happened to poor people and to African-American people. They just dump you over there somewhere. So when I go, I just know she's over there somewhere. This woman who did so much for women, for African-Americans, for the city of Savannah is in an unmarked grave somewhere in Laurel Grove Cemetery. The Savannah Tribune proclaimed of the civic and social contributions of Miss Williams. In eulogizing, it said, in the passing of Miss Mamie George S. Williams, Savannah has lost another citizen, loyal to it to the core, and a tireless champion of her people. Perhaps none of her activities gave her more satisfaction than her work with the Chatham Protective Home for Negro Girls and her work with Girl Scouts. Many children whom she mothered bear eloquent testimony of the devotion to a cause to which she gave in the latter years of her life. Despite her accomplishments, Mamie George Williams has been all but lost to history. She is recalled only by a few who have included her in broad works on women and Savannah. She broke down barriers for women, becoming the nation's first African-American National Republican Committee woman and the first woman of any race to be accorded the floor at the Republican National Convention. And I'm going to stop there because she did something that they wouldn't let Fannie Lou Hamer do at the Democratic Convention in 1964. She began to speak to the Credentials Committee. And all of a sudden, President Johnson decided he had to have an impromptu press conference interrupting her because she began to speak out saying how difficult it was for Blacks to vote in Mississippi and how she wanted her delegation to represent Mississippi. And all of a sudden, Johnson has to have a press conference. So she was cut off, but Mamie Williams was able to stand there and speak for Black people. She battled for African Americans to be heard, counted, and respected in the Republican Party, often standing there alone. Hers was a mothering spirit, a voice crying in the wilderness. Although battle-tested, victorious, and often scarred, she never flinched. She never gave in. Mamie Williams aimed in politics to get everything worthwhile out of it for the race. When I think about her, and I guess I'm just on a mission, that something needs to be done. She needs to be elevated. She needs to be recognized. And I'm sure there were some times when she was weary and tired and disappointed for someone who gave so much to the party that in the end turned its back on her, to the point where she said, do not mention Republican Party to me again. And I'm sure when she was tired sometimes, she had to just kind of pull herself together and just say it. May the work I've done speak for me. May the work I've done speak for me. When I've done the best I can, nobody but Jesus understands. May the work I've done speak for me. Mamie George Williams. Thank you.
Velma, that was wonderful, wonderful.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
That was a treat.
I am going
Velma,
to-
that was terrific.
Thank you. Absolutely.
I'm going to moderate the questions,
Mhm.
but I'm going to start. The obvious question, which no one can answer, is when this woman found time to sleep. I mean, I can't, as you say, she must have been tired. I don't know how she got so much accomplished.
Mhm.
But one of the questions I have is when the League of Women Voters started, our purpose was to register women, but it was also to train them how to vote.
Right.
Where do you go? What do you do? What does it look like when you get in there? And in Savannah, the median of Victory Drive, which was where all of the polling booths were. And of course, part of the deal for the political operatives were they would try to get you drunk. They would try to buy your vote. They would try to get you to come in the front, go out the back, and then go back in the front, and so forth. And this was extremely intimidating for women anyway. But was part of her committee work. I can't imagine how an African-American woman in Savannah at that time would go with confidence into that sort of environment. So was that training them how to vote part of what she did as well?
She did, with holding the mock elections and training them how to vote and kind of giving them a lay of the land. And you're right, I'm wondering how she did this too. I'm
Right.
wondering how she navigated this system, being a woman in the 1920s, the late 1920s and early 30s, and even before that, how she managed to rally women together. But there was a tight-knit group of Republicans, and those who were part of that Republican Party were the movers and the shakers in the African-American community. So some kind of way, the word got out. You hooked up with the people, who, as the kids say, who have the hookup,
Right.
and you work this thing out, and you do as much as you can for your race.
Right. I know that a lot of the white women, they would go together, get a friend, go as a group, whatever, and then they would feel less threatened and safer. So I'm going to ask people who have questions to put up their hand in Zoom. And the first hand I see is Cuffy Sullivan, who is our founder and past president. Cuffy?
I have so many questions. Oh my gosh. Okay, I'll try to keep them. So she never married, is that correct?
She married twice, but was widowed twice.
Widowed twice. Okay, so she had lots of energy because she didn't have to keep up a man. Okay, I get that. The second is, did she ever have children?
She did not. And when I asked the question, why don't we hear about her? I think it's a combination of things. One, being Black and female, being single, being widowed. Because Mary Bowles had a husband whom at some point she just said, I'll let my husband speak for me. Okay, so you're speaking on your own, and you don't have children who continue your legacy. And her sisters and brothers eventually moved to New York. So she indeed was the lone Reed down here. And so she doesn't really have anybody, or didn't have anybody to promote her, except this wonderful group right here sitting in front of me.
Right.
She's got that disadvantage.
Okay. Where did she go to church?
First Congregational.
Okay. That was like the most Savannah question I could just ask. And I think what's so fascinating about your presentation is, as we, like during the 100th year anniversary of the League and, the 100th year anniversary of the women's right to vote, I didn't know that there was this whole women's world back then of committee women.
Oh,
That there were all of these clubs and organizations. There was even an organization of committee organization, club women.
mhm.
And that it was in these where women learned, so much leadership skills, how to run a meeting, how to public speak, how to communicate, how to do all this. And that she was so plugged into the hierarchy of that for Black women, because it was a total leadership opportunity in places where women didn't have, the jobs and other otherwise other social standing. So I think that's fascinating. And then I have so many other questions, but my last one is, well, kind of both. What is TAN? I don't understand what TAN is.
Okay.
So, and then kind of like, I knew that Black Republicans is kind of not a thing. I didn't know it was so specifically erased at such a specific time. What was the Hoover administration kind of when that happened?
The Hoover administration is probably when it ended, because Franklin Delano Roosevelt became president. And
Right.
there, as Mamie Williams predicted, there went the vote, the Black vote for the Republicans. So she kept trying to tell him, you can treat us bad if you want to, but it's not going to work out well for you. So that was one of the things that she was trying to say. When we talk about Black and tan, she didn't talk a lot about her background, but people described her as fair skinned, and when they wanted to be not as nice, described her as a mulatto. So when you look at Black and tan, you're looking, as I said, for Black people who are from the darkest hue to the lightest hue, and we all kind of know how that happens during slavery. Some people visited some other folks' cabins. So
Yeah.
this is the outcome of that. And so you talk about the Black and tans, and from time to time there would be white people who would come into the fold, because some people just love justice. They don't really put a color on it. They just want to do the right thing. And so these were the Black and tans, and they fought against those who were the lily whites. So you had just the whole color thing going on, and the racism and the sexism and any kind of isms you could argue. She had at one point had to tell somebody that, she says, I'm as good a man as you are when it comes to politics, because she was tired of the men walking past her, belittling her, telling her she needs to sit down and be quiet, coming to see her when they wanted a favor. But when she wanted what was due to her, everybody was too busy. So she was fighting on all sides. And sometimes she fought alone. She had a good friend down in Savannah, whose name I can't recall now, Rebecca Stiles, it may have been. And they were very close, but I think Mamie was more into politics and Rebecca more into the women's club. But as we said, they intersected. So she was just this walking whirlwind. And when people saw her, they said, oh Lord, here comes Mamie. You got to be on your P's and Q's, because Mamie's going to ask you some questions, get in your face and demand some answers.
Okay, the next hand I saw was Rena Patton.
Oh, yeah, I think you sort of answered my question when you were talking about, why her legacy wasn't put forward. But I was also very interested in the fact that there's an unmarked grave. It's so like Zora Neale Hurston. And, you think, is there any way to honor her or to find where, if there's what was her financial situation at the end of her life that there's nothing there?
I don't know. She did have a will. She did leave money to her church. So she was not destitute.
Okay.
I am just really surprised. I think they said her husband was one of the leading businessmen and probably built the first 2 or 3 story building. When other people said, you can't do that, he said, well, yes, I can. And he did it. So she comes from a well-heeled community. So I don't really know. One of my visits to Savannah, the street that she stayed on is near West Broad, I believe, and the Carnegie Library. You don't know where that is? Okay,
Yeah.
she's maybe 10 houses down from there. And when I stopped and knocked on the door, because I don't have any better sense than that, than to knock on a stranger's door, students from SCAD were living in the house, And then there was a house across the street that was very well preserved, and I'm hoping that's it. But if there's a way to honor her, I have put forth, maybe she could be honored through this Women's Trail that is putting markers through the United States for women who were part of the suffragist movement, but I haven't heard back. So I was hoping that was a possibility. I'm hoping also that maybe the Girl Scouts will just rename a troop. Just rename a troop after her, so that young Black women will understand what this is about.
Yeah.
You can name a street if there's a scholarship. I think she would like anything that's helping other people. But I really feel that something needs to happen.
Right. I'm hoping we have Cuffy has a connection to the Georgia Historical Society, and Steve has a connection to the Girl Scouts. So I'm hoping maybe some local movers and shakers can help with this. So the next hand I see up is Jennifer West.
Hi there. I am a librarian at Savannah State University,
Mhm.
and I'm wondering, do you have a book coming out of this research? What are your plans for the research that you've done?
Books are funny. However, I am submitting it to a work for Unsung Heroes, but that probably won't be out if it is accepted for a couple of years, maybe about 18 months. So I would like to do something for her. I don't know, a book, a film, a documentary, who's who in Georgia, today in Georgia history, do something for her. And I'm open to suggestions and just kind of a way to, you know, it's been a long time. It's been a long time for her. And we are at a position now where we can make some things happen. And for me, it'll just be a good night's sleep because I don't have to say, okay, maybe I'm doing the best I can. You know, just to give you your just rewards. And she seemed to be a very humble woman. I mean, even when she left the Republican Party, she didn't just throw her hands up. She said, where else can I serve? I have girls, there are girls in the community who need my help. Where else can I serve?
Right.
So she was always about service and
Right.
very well loved in the Black community.
I'm sure. Okay, Margaret Huntley.
Hold on. Okay. One question. You said she was registering Black women to vote in 1920, right?
Right.
Women couldn't vote to 22.
Women in Georgia couldn't vote to 22 because of Georgia politics.
So why were they being registered though?
Because no one knew that this is going to happen. Other states put in what they called like a waiver. Other states in the South said, okay, so our laws may say you need 6 months. So we're going to waive that so women, Black whatever, can vote. And we know Black women really didn't get the right to vote to the passage of the Voting Rights, 1965. But nonetheless, other states at least opened the door for women to vote. Georgia said, we sticking with this rule. Sorry, catch you the next election.
Okay. I have another question, but I can't remember what it was.
Miss Olabisi with her hand up.
Yes. Imam Olabisi. Hello? Can you hear me? Is she on mute?
She's on mute.
Yuli Mama Olabisi.
I'm here.
Yeah.
Okay, this is not so much well, I guess it is a bit of a question, and maybe Cuffy and Steve can help with this. But there is proof that our sister was buried, and there's proof that she was buried in this particular place. So why is it no one knows from there to exactly where she is? I understand there's no marking and all of that, but how do you know she is here, when she was born here, and that she is here, but from there, there's no map, no anything to say where she was? So maybe between Cuffy and your society and Steve with the Girl Scout group, maybe somewhere you can kind of pinpoint that, or at least make some kind of effort to at least direct a little more, get us another step closer to that. And then at some point we might even come together, and this is a big we, come together and honor her with a stone.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful idea. Cuffy just said in the chat, maybe an article in the magazine of the Georgia Historical Society. I know, and someone else said in the chat, I think Kim mentioned this in her introduction. Mamie is one of the Women of Achievement in Georgia, which is the Rosalind Carter organization. So I'm like you, I can't believe that no one knows where she's buried and that there's not some way to find out. And even if we can't find out exactly this grave, is there a way to put a marker in that cemetery in her honor, for instance?
And give her a place of honor, so it is noted. Right. I don't know how it works legally.
Right.
So here's what I found on her death certificate, and I called the funeral home, which has changed hands, but still there. It indicates that she purchased a plot, but no one has the plot number. So it was never written down. So we know the section she's buried in, but then you're looking at 500 or 600 graves in that section. But you're right. Can we put something in the section? Even if we never can say, it's right there, we can say, aha, she's right here.
Right, exactly. Obviously, she absolutely deserves it. We also have a question from Teresa Timmons. Teresa? Teresa.
Okay, here we go. Okay, so by the description that you've given us, I mean, you can tell she's a very strong and persistent woman, but did you find anything that kind of describes her personality? Because she was so persistent and so successful at the things that she went after. And I ask that because in that atmosphere of that time, even now, you know, if we do something, people shy away from you if they realize that you're an agitator or resistance. But in that time, she was very successful.
Yeah, what did they say? Well-behaved women don't make history.
There you go.
So she didn't have time to be nice.
Yeah.
All that I could find is that she really enjoyed going to New York, where she had family, where her brothers and sisters were. In New York, when her mother died, her mother received accolades in the Black press there. So, and I, you know, there's a New York connection with the Barboza family name. So I'll probably need some help with some people who are great with social media, at least kind of get the word up there. Hey, we're trying to honor your great, great, great aunt. Can somebody help me out here? What do you know about her? You know,
where does she fall in the order of the family? Is she like the oldest?
I don't remember, but I don't remember. I don't think she was the oldest.
Well, it sounds like she started on her mother's shoulders if she is someone that came from a mother that had accolades when she passed.
And it's amazing. You know, she just took to politics in Atlanta and nationally. I mean, when I'm doing research, I'm reading things from newspapers in Kansas.
Cool.
You know, I'm reading newspapers everywhere. I'm like, what? You know, they're just picking up the story and running with it. But, you know, we could call her name now and we get the same what? Who?
Right. Okay. I think that's all the questions we have.
Oh, we got a hand. Ann has a hand up.
And
Rebecca,
I knew Ann couldn't leave without asking a question.
I was looking how to raise the hand, but I don't have one of those. And I apologize, I arrived late. So you may have already answered this, and you just mentioned newspapers. I wanted to know what your primary sources were. How did she become so real to you?
The newspapers, and at that time, the newspapers were very colorful in their descriptions. And so a lot of this I pulled from newspapers, but I was very, very pleased to find a letter and have a copy of that sent to me from the Hoover Library. So I was like, oh my God, this is real. You know, the Hoover Library has it, you know. I said, anything on Mamie George, oh yeah, we have something, let me send it to you. So that was another level, you know, because it's so difficult to understand why she wasn't honored. I began to question, is all of this information true? Could she be a phantom? You know, but then when like I said, when newspapers are beginning to pick it up, and someone at the Greenbrier Center said, we saw something, now that you mentioned her, we saw something about her. So she's beginning to pop up. When I talk about the Girl Scouts, I have newspaper articles that talk about how she was a leader in the Girl Scout movement for African Americans. And there's a different African American woman who was elevated. But then again, you know, it's like, oh my goodness, it's right here. Oh, it's in another paper. Oh, so I have 3 sources that are saying this. There could be some truth to this. So it's just a matter of kind of piecing it all together. I wish she had, like I said, a family. I've contacted the church. Nothing. She and her husband were members, and I know memories kind of drop off as the older people leave. But you know, you would figure somebody of that ilk and someone who left your church some money in the will, that some deacon or trustee.
And nothing in the Georgia Historical Society. You've checked with the Georgia Historical Society.
They had a bit, but nobody has really kind of dug in. She just won't give me a break. You know, I found some nice photos from her, from the Georgia Historical Society, but she's just, you know, she's relentless now as she was in 1924. She's relentless.
Yeah. Nevertheless, she persisted.
She persisted.
Well, I'm going to thank you, Velma, so much. This was wonderful. And thank you for the lovely song.
Thank you.
And you have a beautiful voice.
Thank you.
I think the thing I've written down and I'm going to take away with me is the quote that we should lift as we climb. I think that's a wonderful motto and a way to look at women and African-American women and the fight for democracy in the United States. So I really
and
thank
that
you.
was the motto of the women, of the
Yes.
National Women's Clubs, lifting as we climb.
Lift as we climb. It's wonderful. So thank you for all you've done to
you.
bring this unsung heroine to our attention. And I hope we can spread the word even more. We, as we said at the beginning, we are recording this, but we will only share it with our members so that an article, a book, or whatever you can do with your research has, you know, the copyright to all of your hard work. So thank you so much, and we'll have you in Savannah the next time.
All right, great. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.